Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Emotional Entrepreneur Show with Summer and
Jen. We're reversed today.
We're reversed. That's right, we are. And I got my fingers right. I got the pointy right. So here we are.
And you're right. You're right. I got a point to my left.
So we are here and talking about something that we've probably all gone through before, and that is imposter syndrome. And we're going to talk about today how to manage, how to understand, how to really thrive as an entrepreneur once you understand how to get past and work through imposter syndrome. Are you ready?
Let's do this. I love this. I love this topic.
Let's do this. And welcome to the folks who are out there on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And today, folks, we are using a new platform. So bear with us. We're still learning this new platform. We're excited about this. So here we are. Okay, wait, I'm trying to hook up. Just a second. I'm trying to make sure that we're hooked up on LinkedIn. So Jen, when you think of imposter syndrome, what's the first thing you think of?
A lot of things. I think I'm not good enough, or not. I don't say I'm not good enough. I'll say, are people really going to like this? Which is a form of I'm not good enough, but it's like my initial reaction goes towards whatever it is I'm going to do, whether it's a workshop or, something like that, or especially if it's teaching something, it's always like, okay, is this going to be good? I hope people like it. Can I really talk about it? And then my brain starts to go into comparing mode where I'm like, yeah, but there's other people that teach this too, and they have a bigger following. And it's just like laughing because I'm like, why do we do this? And
yeah.
It's so crazy how our mind just starts to run away with all these crazy thoughts. And just really starting to doubt yourself, or that it comes to, along with the, we start to compare ourselves. I know for me personally, I'll look to people that I admire and be like, oh my gosh, they're already there, and I'm talking about this tiny thing, and then my brain starts to go to like, and I don't got these funnels set up, and I don't got all this stuff set up, and then everybody else is like, all on automation, everything, all the systems are in place, and then it's just like, screw it. It becomes too much when you start to think, and then eventually I'll go down to like, just keep it simple right now. Like you're getting crazy. This is me talking to myself. Like you're being silly, and you're being crazy. Like it doesn't have to be complicated all the time. Like sometimes it is as simple as hitting the go live button. Sometimes it's as simple as just talking and just encouraging the people that do show up. Sometimes we do get worried about numbers, and they're important, but it's when it starts to overtake your mind, and then you start getting into this cycle of like, oh my gosh, but there's only this many people. And every time I've had these conversations with others and people I've done, even Summer and I'm like, we still show up. You still got to show. And that was something I learned in financial services when we used to have meetings, and you're waiting your hope. And this is before live was happening, or even Zoom. This is like way back in the day. And you hold these client seminars and whatnot, and there were really good ones and there were really sucky ones, and like maybe oh yay, my parents are in the audience. So there was 2 people out of the 5.
Yeah, right.
Because they were my clients too, but I hated having to drag them out because they were so disciplined. They really didn't need to hear it again. But you still show up, you still give your best, and you still and use it as a teaching moment. Sometimes, a lot of times too, when I have friends who are doing presentations, I'll say like, well, how did it go? They're like, well, it was an okay turnout. I said, well, that's okay. Use this moment to, especially when you look at the registration numbers, right? It can be discouraging. And sometimes it's a lot of times I'll say it's a marketing issue. How good did you market? How good did you promote? So it's not so much that you suck. It's like your marketing efforts suck. So it's not you, okay? It's something that we probably could have done a better job of promoting. That's a whole different issue. But when you look at that and you see like, okay, I only got a few people, it's still a moment to do your best and to use that moment as, hey, this is for me to work out the kinks. Hey, this is the first time I'm putting this presentation on. Like, I had this conversation with a CEO I do work with very closely, and I'm like, do your best. Use this as a moment to test out the presentation we made. Take notes, and then we'll make changes later. And a lot of times that's what it is. And so when you step back and you kind of come back to earth, you realize I'm putting so much freaking pressure on myself. This is so silly. So, I mean, I know you asked what's the first thing that goes to your brain, and I just took you through this journey.
That's okay. That's what this is about. I want to read some of the comments, and thank you, Jen, for answering that question. It wasn't circumstantial at all. It was the journey, right? And so, and circumstantial means when you take somebody in a circle, right? From beginning to end. It was what you were talking about was a journey and situations where, and I want to get into the psychological insights into some of this, because this is where I draw from my expertise. And I think it's really important, and things that maybe haven't been addressed about imposter syndrome before. And in the way that I want to address it today, not just from the perspective of, okay, what are the mind shifts, or what are the, yes, I want to talk about triggers. I want to talk about your successes. But I want to talk about some of the psychological insights too about managing imposter syndrome. I do want to talk about here too, about some of I want to mention Bibiana's comments here. And she says, asking random people, does my bottom look big in a dress when I'm the one who bought it, liked it, and worked for it? Bibiana says, I've heard about authors doing a public reading and signing, and no one came. Ouch. You need a wing woman. Will work for chocolate and red wine to help support you, to help you out there, right? And then Cynthia says, oh gosh, those are the nightmare scenarios, B. But we've all been there. We have all been there. And here's the thing. It's a learning moment. It's a learning opportunity, right? And at least you went out and did it. You went out and did it. And that's the important part. And then Bibiana says, right, I would be so down after something like that. Got to have somebody to cheer you on, even if you have to bake them cookies. Well, guess what realtors do? They bake. They bake cookies. They bake something so that their house smells good. The one that they're trying to sell, food also brings people in, and it's an opportunity to eat a little something and mingle, right? As you're trying to sell something. So think of a way to promote yourself that works, and do your research. But here's the psychological components that I want to touch on. So I come from two very different schools of thought. So when I was coming up the ranks of psychology, we had to learn all these various theories and practices as to how to work with people. And some people might say, oh, wow, your knowledge of psychological theory and practice are wide and you're eclectic. No, I didn't want to be eclectic. I wanted to focus on two things and two theorists. I wanted to know the others, but I really needed to know my profession and to know the frameworks from which I practiced. I really needed to focus in on two of those frameworks. And two of them were from, I'm like, oh my God, I just blanked. From Albert Ellis. I know, right? And then my God, why am I blanking? This is so weird. Okay, so let's start with Albert Ellis. So, and Alfred Adler. I'm like, oh my God, why am I totally blanking? When you have those moments and you're like, oh my gosh, okay. So Alfred Adler and Albert Ellis, and their names are, kind of similar. So Alfred Adler, he basically deviated from Freud, and he said, you know what? Not everything is subconscious. There are things that happen to us and that we're just not maybe paying attention, or that end up getting into our subconscious because we allow that to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that he said is, and one thing that's really important about his theoretical and practical premise is our point of discouragement. Where have we become discouraged? What
Mm,
words, phrases, what were the experiences that caused that discouragement? So,
right.
what I would like for you today is when it comes to imposter syndrome, think about what was that point of discouragement that's holding you back? What is getting in the way of you moving forward? Thank you, Bibiana. She said Adler. I was like,
Thank
oh
you.
my God, I'm having a block. So, yes. So, what was that point of discouragement? What were the words, phrases, experiences that you had that may be stuck in your psyche where you have said those things over and over, or you've believed them, where they've gotten in the way of your success, of your goals, from taking that next step, or as Jen would put it, pressing the go live button,
Right.
right? The second person is Albert Ellis. Now, Albert Ellis, he believed in rational emotional behavior therapy, right? And he came up with that term, REBT. And what he said is basically do the things you're most afraid of.
Mm,
And he was very direct. And so I come from a place where, yeah, there's some psychotherapy, but Albert Ellis was very direct. So when I was working with a lot of my clients, I would be very direct and say, what are your thoughts? What are you currently doing that's getting in the way of yourself? Let's do the reverse. Let's try and go out there and do what you're afraid of. How can you take those steps? Do one thing, one thing. What might that thing be? What might that thing be today for you? And here are some of the, again, some of the thought process, some of the feelings, some of the rationale. How are you rationalizing getting in the way of yourself? How are you rationalizing your fears? How are you rationalizing your discouragement today? How are you doing that? Let's turn that around. So rationalize your courage, rationalize your excitement, rationalize, so do the opposite. Do what you're afraid of. So Bibiana says, expectation of others can be a huge wall. When I became a writer, I expected to be cheered on by family, when in reality, many were hypercritical and not encouraging at all. I was shocked. So what does that mean, Bibiana? So when you say that you were, when you became a writer, you expected your family to cheer you on. When you understood that, and you had that idea, that recollection, she says, I decided to create my own community and cheer myself on. There you go. And now Albert Ellis would say, exactly. Do things that scare you. Do things that get you out of your comfort zone. Do the thing that you're reluctant to do. Take the risk. Press the go live button. And we're going to use that as the idiom for today. Press the go live button, right? Cynthia says yes. And sometimes it's about just the way that you get out of the way of yourself is about how are you rationalizing this? And people will say, your mindset, your vibration. No, let's think about it this way. How are you getting in the way of yourself? What are your thoughts? What are the words and phrases you continue to use? There was something that, it was a video that I heard from somebody this morning and a friend. And I thought, well, you know what? He's exactly on point. And I said this for years and years because of these theorists, because of these doctors that I've practiced over the years and use their techniques, methods, and ideology to really help support a lot of my clients is what are you doing? What are you saying? And what have you experienced that is impacting you where you're getting in the way of yourself? Jen,
yeah,
thoughts?
that's a lot. I wanted to go back to what Viviana said. Yeah, about like friends and family not supporting. I think that's very common. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, I don't know, I guess it's an expectation we have of our friends and family because I think we expect them to love us. And so when it comes to our goals and dreams, we have that expectation. Well, of course, naturally, you're going to support me. Well, of course, you're going to tell me things that are going to be encouraging. And I don't know what happens along the way, but you know what it is? It's a lot of times it's a few things. I think one of them, and we have talked about this in previous episodes. One of them is that that they're trying to keep you safe. And it's their fear that they're projecting a lot of times. Well, this is one of them. I think their fear is being projected on you, where they're fearing like, well, what if that doesn't work? Well, what if that what if you don't make money from it? And well, what if nobody buys your product or whatever it is you're selling? And so, like, especially going into entrepreneurship, it's a whole different beast that not many people venture into. So there's a lot of fear that they're not even aware of, like all these things that you have to go through. And so it's a lot of like, let me keep you safe because I'm afraid for you. I also think it could be jealousy. I sometimes think that maybe some people secretly wish that they could get out of their own situation, wish that they could have ventured off into that project that they've been saying they've been wanting to do for years and just never took the first step. And now they're seeing you do it. It's now this, I was talking about this yesterday with a friend. It's about like this, crab mentality. Like, well, why should you get ahead? Are you better than me? It's like, well, yeah, in a sense, I'm just taking action and you're not, and you're feeling a certain way about yourself right now. And so I think there's so many different things going on, and it doesn't mean we make them wrong. It's just having to understand, like, okay, you don't have the rationale. You don't have the mindset to understand why I'm doing this, and that if anything at this very moment, I need your support and your love and encouragement. But sometimes people in that position are not capable of it. I don't even think they're aware sometimes of what they're doing. Some may be. I think the jealous people might be like, well, why should I encourage you? And that's a jealousy thing. But like you said, Bibiana, that's why it is so important that we have to build our own community around people that are like-minded, people that are walking a similar journey, where it's going out into the trenches, it's hitting the go live button when you don't even want to hit the go live button. It's being able to, one of the things I love about our community is that not only are we a community, but a lot of us are friends. Like, we genuinely and truly are friends outside of the business relationships. I kind of think it's some natural thing where you spend so much time working on projects together, or even having, the Zoom calls and just listening to what people are going through, that you start to realize, like, hey, we can encourage each other through these struggles, through this road where there's a lot of ups and downs. And so it's natural for us to become friends. And I know for me personally, most of my closest friends are entrepreneurs, but it's just, we just gravitate towards each other because we understand the plight and the journey. But not only that, it's also because we genuinely are cheering for each other. Like, you come out with a new book, we're celebrating that. We're going to Amazon and buying it when it comes out. You have a program, or you're doing a webinar. We're out there to, we're sharing the link. So it's so important to have that community, because the more that you are not in one, and you are going through those moments of experiencing imposter syndrome, the tougher it's going to be to get out of that mindset, because if you are already feeling that way, and then you don't have anybody to rally around you if you need that, and you go to the family member who's been discouraging you, I mean, where's that going to go? It could be like, I told you so. Well, why are you still doing that? I mean, it could go in a number of negative directions. So absolutely, thank you for sharing that, because we talk about building those relationships and that community, and why it's so important.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to read comment from Cynthia and Bibiana. Bibiana says, I always feel like Alice right before the live button goes on. And then Cynthia says, I agree. Those anticipatory moments right before a live are the hardest. That's right. And Bibiana said, totally see it. And then Bibiana also said, I've wondered if it was Jay. Sometimes I think they don't want us to change because then they have to self-reflect. That
Right.
monkey for real, and then baby lonely, not monkey, that's lonely for real. And then also here we have somebody from, I believe, LinkedIn or YouTube, and Edwin says people do business with people they like, and that is true. That is very true. But let me pose this: they do business with people they like because they have some kind of commonality.
Right.
So the people that you tend to hang out with have some type of commonality. Let's say, for instance, us as entrepreneurs. We are entrepreneurs, and as such, we go through similar things, not exactly the same things, but there are ups and downs, there are peaks, there are valleys, there are challenges. And what happens is we connect with one another. We have similarities where we can talk about those things. We can relate to each other, right? And so, um, just like when I was working in the field of psychology in hospitals, who were my friends? Clinicians.
Right.
Those that did the job that I did because we understood each other. When I go out to dinner with my husband and his friends, they're his coworkers, and guess what they talk about? Work, right? Or if he has a hobby, he likes to fish. Guess what they talk about? Fishing, right? So there's some common theme, right,
Right.
in relation to, or let me give you the opposite of a situation that wasn't so good. So I had a friend growing up and went to college with her. And later found out she did some things that were not the best of things, but we loved hanging out. I would go and travel to see her. But when I found out, and I had noticed certain behavior patterns over the years as well, but I kind of pushed them aside. I kind of pushed them aside and said, yeah, but we have this in common. We have this in common, and I'm going to overlook some of those things that I've been recognizing because I don't want to really delve deep. I knew in my heart that something was going on, but I didn't address it. I didn't say, hey, what's going on? And this person ended up getting arrested. And she was in law school. She basically blew her chance in law school. She did all, and she did these things. And I knew at that point, I was like, you know what? It's not in my best interest to continue down this road. And I give that example because it's a very concrete example of why we feel like we go through that imposter syndrome, because we go through it because we keep going down the same road. If you don't recognize the road that you're actually going down in relation to the choices that you're making, whether it's a professional relationship, it's a relationship with yourself in regards to your entrepreneurship, or it's a relationship that you have with another person, your child, somebody that you're intimate with, or others, what's the road that you decide to go down? It's choice. And I'm sure you recognize it, but sometimes it's difficult to step out of it, right? Because we don't want to recognize or really identify, how am I actually allowing this to happen to myself? Why do I keep going down the same roads? Why do I keep creating the same patterns of behavior? And so I go back to Alfred Ellis because it's a pretty severe line that he's taking, right? And he says, this is related to not just your thoughts, but your behavior. How are those two things aligning? And why are they aligning in such a way that you're not achieving your goals? So take a deeper dive, take a look, right? And so we look at Albert Ellis and Alfred Adler, and we look at these two approaches that they take, and they're very different. Because Albert Adler is saying, where's your point of discouragement? And that's what I want you to do today. I want you to try and take a look at that point of discouragement, take a look at yourself, and take a look at also how your behavior and your thoughts are aligning to understand where it is that you're going. Why are you getting in the way of yourself? What are those thoughts and phrases that you continue to use that you could actually change today to make a difference towards where you want to be? And I know that we have different variables, such as family, such as our friends, such as that influence our behavior and our thoughts. So, are those healthy influences? Or not such healthy influences? And I can give you another example. So, if I hang out with people that don't care about what they eat, guess what? That day, I probably won't care about what I eat very much either. I'm going to be throwing caution to the wind and going, okay, I can eat that brownie. I can take that milkshake. I can do that burger. I can do that, where if I'm around somebody who's like making a different choices, I'm learning from that person too. Where they're going to work out every day, they're journaling, they're doing their various other things. And I'm like, you know what? She's really doing well. Maybe something's really working for her. Maybe I'll try that. Maybe I'll try that different approach.
It's funny because like when somebody like a friend, that an old friend that we haven't hung out in a long time,
Yeah.
but they'll make plans. Like it literally happened like a couple weeks ago. I've known her for, oh my gosh, more than 30 years. And it's so funny because she wrote in the email, she's like, okay, maybe we can grab dinner, because I'm doing another panel talk, and then she invited me, and then she's like, okay, maybe afterwards we can grab dinner. She goes, I know you eat healthy, but can you eat bad this one time? And I'm just laughing because I'm like, it must be almost like a part of my personality that's what somebody assumes. I'm like, no, I have my bad moments. It's like, yeah, we can totally eat unhealthy. It's fine. Like I don't do that all the time. Like it's totally cool. Yeah. It's just funny that she asked me that. I was like, yeah, it's fine. But you're absolutely right, Summer, about, you know, that I think that's why that phrase is birds of a feather flock together. Yeah. You know, it's you're easily influenced by, you know, your environment, and that's your physical environment as well as the relationships with people that you have. And yeah, I mean, this is why if you're a parent, you know, you worry about your kid hanging around with the wrong kids, and you see that friend of theirs that keeps getting into trouble, your spider senses are like, okay, if this keeps going on, like what kind of trouble is my kid gonna end up in, because they're just hanging around that kid. So it's a totally perfect example of how we are influenced by our surroundings.
Oh, absolutely. I want to read a couple of comments here because I do not want these to go away without us, you know, before we close down here today. But Viviana says, the beauty of doing your own thing, you never have to feel that frustration from being in an office where some people are not invested and it bleeds into everything. I don't miss that at all. Yeah. And here you're setting the terms for yourself. So we've come to the end of the show today, but I want to ask Jen her nugget, because I also have a very important nugget too that I want to share with you all today. Jen, what is your nugget?
I think my nugget would be, I'd actually heard this morning. I was listening to a devotional, and it's this lady who wrote a book called The Gift of Rejection. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And I actually really, really am enjoying it. And her name is Nona Jones. That's what it is. Uh-huh. She was like the head of like ministries or something with Facebook. And now I can tell she doesn't say that in her introduction anymore. So I think she doesn't work there anymore. But she wrote this book. And so her devotional is like 5 days of this topic. And one of the things that she said was, you know, a lot of things stem from rejection throughout our life. And this is why, you know, which is so related to the imposter syndrome, like and what you said earlier, right, Summer? And it's about this, how do you, you know, take a look. So here's my freaking nugget. Let me get to the nugget, Jen, get to the nugget. So think about what are some of those points in your life where you experience like, you know, there's going to be small and big times, but that has happened. But think of those moments where you experienced that rejection. And then what was the belief that was formed at that time of rejection? Did somebody, you know, and when I heard this yesterday, I was like, oh my gosh, I remember when my cousins like made fun of me when I was little, and this is what belief came from that. And now as an adult, I have to say, is that true though? Do I really want to take on that truth? And a lot of it is, and this lady's right. Oh my gosh, so much of it has stemmed from rejection and all those different points and times and moments it has occurred in our lives. And I think that's how it's affecting our, you know, our self-esteem, our self-worth, our deservingness, all these different things. And so think about those times and reflect and what can you derive from it? Because maybe some of these things that are popping up during this imposter syndrome that's happening to you at that moment that it occurs, where is it coming from? What are those different points of rejection that have happened to you that you can derive the belief that, you know, where did it come from? And then you can work through that, because as we all know, it starts with awareness.
Absolutely. I love that. And it sounds like, is it Nona?
Yeah, Nona.
So it sounds like Nona was taking some a play out of Alfred Adler's playbook. What is the point of discouragement?
Yeah, she probably did, because I remember I don't remember if she said the psychologist's names, but I was like, oh, cool, this is rooted in some theory. I like
Yeah,
this.
and these are doctors that have done their research over time, and they all derive from, you know, either Freud, or they've established their science, um, not just from philosophy and not just from theory, but there's a practice behind this. So whether or not it's qualitative or quantitative or both, there is premise and foundation for these theories. And so I love what she's saying, because it sounds very familiar, and it sounds like Alfred Adler, where he's saying, where's your point of discouragement? You said one thing that I do want, and thank you for that nugget. You said one thing that I do want to tap into here is, do it was something about the fact that, you know, is this a fact, or is this something, what you put in your head and what you create as a fact, is it really, is it something that you want to take on and believe, or is it something that somebody you believed because somebody told you that over and over again, right? And so
Right.
you made it something to believe, and that's concrete and that's factual in your mind, but not necessarily. And that's where that deep dive comes in. So thank you for pointing that out. The one thing I want to also point out for my nugget today is boundaries. We set boundaries for other people, but have we ever set boundaries for ourselves? In meaning, and we might say, well, there's no boundaries, but what if you continue to go back to those same words and phrases, or those same behaviors, and your words and phrases and your behaviors are aligning, but not in the way that you want them to? So where do you say, stop, I need to set a boundary for myself and start working and deconstructing this,
Oh
right?
my gosh. Yes. 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 I'll tell you real quick. Like, I have a client
Yeah.
who I've been working with for a long time, and she keeps telling her mom stuff. And then she keeps coming back to me and telling, like, I told my mom this is what I want to do. She wants to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And she's creative. And then she'll tell me about, like, well, my mom said this, and why are you doing that? And like, why aren't you gonna get another job? The whole, conversation. And I finally got to a point where I had to tell her, why do you keep doing this? You already know what to expect from your mom. You can still love her. I'm not saying don't love her. I'm not saying, don't have a relationship with her. But when it comes to you sharing your entrepreneurial dreams, you already know what's going to happen. So you have to create this boundary. Otherwise, just expect the answer and you know what it's going to be, because we went over it so many times already. So
Yeah.
that's a perfect example of, like, the boundaries. It's so important, because her spirit would just get crushed.
Yeah.
And she's like, well,
Yeah.
what do I
And so are
do?
you,
And I'm like, stop telling her things. Talk to
right,
your
and are you
other friends. Like,
allowing this to continue
yes,
to
please
happen?
stop the madness.
Yeah. Are you allowing this to continue to happen as you continue to go back to the same thing, the same behavior? And Albert Ellis would be like, stop, stop,
Right.
right? Put a boundary on yourself. And that's why, even with that friend, and I gave you that example, and if you didn't see this entire episode, check it out. There's a lot of good information here from both Jen and I and the people that are watching today. Stop, put a boundary on yourself, and start a new process. Deconstruct what's getting in your way so you have an awareness, and then move forward in a different direction.
Right.
Because if you continue to want to go back to that same behavior, guess what? You're going to get the same results.
And that's
So
the definition of, what we, that we all hear, insanity.
that's right. And so, this is the hard me. This is the hard line Albert Ellis me, right? I've got the softer side of the Alfred Adler, where he's like, well, we departed and we got hurt, and that kind of, but there's an Albert Ellis side of me too. And sometimes it's that hard line. If you want to change something, you need to work on it and start deconstructing what you've built up in your mind, heart, and spirit and soul to get past that. And so, with that said, oh my gosh, thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Oh, and thank you. Hello, Adrian. Hello, Tony. And Adrian says, we can set boundaries. It's making sure that we follow them. Exactly, Adrian. And then Tony says, if your parent is not an entrepreneur, chances are they won't get it. And that is true. Not just your parent, if your spouse, if your friends, because trust me, I got a spouse, and sometimes he doesn't understand because he's not an entrepreneur. He wants to understand, but it's difficult because he's also seen me in a different role, in a very professional, in a different arena. And he said, you always can go back to that and make a lot, make some money. You don't have to just do that and struggle and and try and get to where you want. But to me, it's not a struggle. It's a dream. It's a goal. It's so it's the interpretation, right?
Right.
Their understanding versus my understanding. So, any hoozle, are you ready?
Yes. Thank you
All
guys
right.
for being here.
Thank you. And thank you for bearing with us as we learn this new program, because there's a little bit more of a delay today because of this new program, but we're still working on it. So thank you so much for hanging out with us. And you know how we do this. We dance it out. If you didn't catch this whole show, please catch the replay and also tell your friends about the show. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday with a new topic. All right. Thank you, Jen. Let's dance this out. Woo! Bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye, everyone.